Jennifer Fondrevay. Did I get that right? Because I forgot to look at the pronunciation before.
You did.
Nice.
By the way, it was really tricky to how do I write my name phonetically? So I did spend time trying to figure that out.
I should have looked at it, because that's why I have it there. Because I grew up named kind of one of my things. I'm so excited to have you here because you've had just such an amazing life. And as I've talked to you, I've seen the depth of who you are as a person. And I'm really excited to explore that with you.
I'm excited to explore it too. Who knows what'll come out of my mouth? I have no
It's the
idea.
best part, isn't it? It's like an adventure. So we usually like to start with the question of when your workaholic first emerged.
So here's what's funny. Even right before we came on, when you said that was your first question, I was like, oh, that didn't even start at work. It started in seventh grade because I was such a slacker. Prior, I had a teacher, a science teacher, Miss Johnson. She was handing out grades, and I got a C on my science test, and that was kind of typical grade for me at that time. And I remember her looking at me and quietly saying, "You can do better than this." Uh, and I thought, "Holy cow!" Like she paid attention, she actually cared, and so I thought, "Oh, let's see if I could." And on the next test, she waved around the class. Who do you think got the highest grade in the class? And everyone thought it was Missy, who actually happened to be a good friend of mine. And no, she said Jennifer Fondrevay. And I remember all the look of shock, including mine. So I think it was at that point that I thought, oh, if I work harder, I can do better. And then I kind of took it to an extreme.
Isn't it amazing how not everyone I talk to is born this way. A lot of times we're shaped this way. Most of the people I talk to, only one or two of the people I've talked to actually feel like they were born this way. The rest of us, it was shaped over time through some sort of experience that either reinforced from a negative or a positive perspective that this works. So let's go do more of this.
Yeah. Oh, and I tell that story not in a negative, right?
No, yeah.
She motivated me and helped me tap into a side of me that
Mhm.
I realized, oh, I actually do have the brain power to do better if I just work harder. I think it's when you don't set the boundaries that can
Yeah.
be against you. So I have no blame for Miss
Oh,
Johnson.
no, that's awesome that she's been with that. I love it. Those people that inspired us. It goes both ways depending on who I'm talking to. So that's amazing. And so you talked about that, like it started and it grew and it grew and eventually you crossed a boundary. What was that magical boundary line you think you crossed?
It's hard to hindsight's always 2020, and
Mhm.
I can't really define it by some epiphany moment that I had. After seventh grade, then I moved downtown, um, downtown Chicago. So I was out in the suburbs of Chicago, and I moved downtown for eighth grade. And there, you kind of spend time trying to break in with the other kids. And it's funny because I was actually just sharing this story with my son. I got into the, uh, you know, uh, critical thinking group. I think it was like the smarter kids went into one room, and I got placed in that room. But then I did something, either something stupid. I missed a homework or I wasn't contributing enough in class, so they moved me back down. But then that teacher said, "No, no, no, no. She should not be in this room. We got to put her back in the other room." But I remember thinking, I need to stay in this room. I don't want to lose my place in this room. So then I started working hard again, to make sure I stayed in there. And thankfully, they had no thoughts about moving me again. But it was like a cue in my head that said, you can't coast, right? You can't just, Miss Johnson reminded you you have this capability. You've now moved downtown. You had to settle in. So, yep, we'll give you that. But you got to work hard if you want to be acknowledged, if you want to be in the room where it happens. And so I think I just got into my head at that point. You got to always be working at this. Like you can never let up. Um, and honestly, if you hadn't asked me these questions, I probably wouldn't have even thought back that far. We tend to just think
Mhm.
like where our career started, but I realized that some of the things, because you asked me like, what's that journey? I think it starts earlier than we ever realize, and you don't realize it until someone asks you questions and you start thinking about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I love what you said. You needed to be in that room. I think those were the words. Like, I want to be in this room. I need to be in this room, the room where it happens.
Yep.
So at what point did that room, because that room gets bigger and bigger, right? You were part of M&A, so you ran marketing teams. It got bigger and bigger and bigger. So at what point did that hard work stop serving you in that room?
My first acquisition. I mean, honestly, if I were to think about it, I I recognized after that acquisition, so I was at that point the global head of B2B marketing for a company called Navtech, a company I adored. I mean, I it was my dream job. I loved the people I worked with. I admired my boss, and she was very good with me, and my team was super. Yeah. Not to say that there weren't challenges, but it was really an amazing job. After the acquisition, it just started to unravel. And there were a lot of variables that contributed to it. But I realized in that moment, because I kept working so hard to say, look, see, we still have value. Look at what we've done. I would do PowerPoints. I would work up late into the night to create, this manifesto of how B2B marketing serves our customers. And they didn't care. They didn't wanna know what I'd done in the past, how my team had contributed to sales growth exponentially. What they wanted to know was how we were gonna contribute to the future. And it's why a lot of my talk now is about letting go of the past to contribute to the future, right? To see those future opportunities. But it came from that really painful moment of realizing I was exhausting myself and no one was caring.
Oh, I had a great when I moved into consulting years ago, I had a great mentor who once told me, when you're a consultant, it's about what did you do for me lately? No one cares what you did a year ago. And you really did have to, re-earn your stripes every day. And that can also lead to a sense of workaholism because if you're trying to re-earn your stripes every day and it's never enough, did it do that for you or did it do the opposite?
Moving into consulting?
No, when you went through this merger and acquisition process and you had this experience where you had to start focusing on what was ahead and what was in front
Yeah.
of you right now and letting go, did that help you release the pressure or did it build it because now you had to re-earn?
It was hard. It was my very first acquisition experience.
Mhm.
So I always want to be very quick to say it was a multi-billion-dollar
Yeah.
acquisition. And I have learned the bigger the billions, the bigger the bloodbath.
Yes.
So it was traumatic. Soul sucking is, I think, the best way I can describe it. And so I had so many epiphany moments, but the hard part for me was that recognition. It's why I said to you, when you asked me, when was the boundary? When did you let it go? It was that
Mhm.
journey through that first acquisition because I had given up so much, time with my children. I was that mom who would literally, my husband would drive me to the airport and my children would cling to my legs. I mean, it was just awful. And I was thinking, I gave up that for literally my value to feel like it was dissolving in front of me. And I thought, I
Mm.
gave up so much. And yet, for what? Right? So it was a lot of, I was definitely in the depression stage of grief for a while. I think now the joy that I have, after seeing that is I now decide where I'm going to put my time, where I'm going to put my energy, and making clear that I determine my value.
Yeah.
Let it be determined by external people, external, circumstances. It's me. And I think that pivot in particular, moving into consulting and owning my time was the big moment. I would love to answer your question and say, yes, it all became clear during that initial journey, but it wasn't. It was murky.
And consulting can help. Like running your own company really does put you in the driver's seat because there's truly only one person who decides. Like
Mhm. Yeah,
what clients you serve, what contracts you cut, what deals you close is 100% up to you. And you can look in the mirror and there's one person looking back at you.
right.
So that's amazing that you took that as a way to kind of find that power in that situation, your own deeply rooted personal power, it sounds like.
Well, it was a journey. I mean, I'll be clear. The first one was really rough. I went through 2 more acquisitions, so I don't wanna make it sound as though, "Oh, yeah, I figured it out right away." I mean, as you and I have both discussed, life's a journey.
Yeah.
The where you're smart is picking up on those lessons along the way. As much
Yeah.
as you pick up on those along the way, just it helps in your education, your life education. So I was just thankful by the 3rd one, I thought, this is not gonna get better.
Mm.
Uh, and I mean that also for myself, not just mergers and acquisitions and how they're executed, but for myself. I have a tendency to give 120% to everything. I can't. I'm bad at setting boundaries when it comes to really seeing opportunities and jumping in and making it happen. And then you go through mergers and acquisitions and the metrics change and you have to shift and pivot. And I'm thinking, yeah, but look at everything I did. Look at everything we did, our teams, right? You can get so focused on that. And I thought, I've got to figure out a way to do mergers and acquisitions better so that the value that people bring is not lost, that it doesn't go up in smoke instantaneously, but it evolves and changes and then people can see how they can move forward. So that really for me was the pivot. But it's been through, years of learning that lesson.
So I'm hearing two things. One is learning to let go yourself, but the other is creating an ecosystem that does honor what people have brought so that they can let go and move on.
Yes.
Holding both of those trees. So let's start with talking about how you let go, because letting go is the single hardest part when I talk to workaholics. It's often quieting those voices because it does require we let go of a lot. And we're not so great at humans at letting go. So what helped you release some of that?
You're gonna laugh. Last year, I did a TEDx talk, and that's when it became clear to me. And I would love to say, oh, I had this epiphany years ago. Um, but I did a TEDx talk about embracing uncertainty, right? Creating opportunity in an uncertain world. And through the journey of writing that, so it wasn't even like, this is my talk, and wow, I had the idea. But my journey in writing that, and it had always been the underlying theme of my talk, right? When you know your value, that's when you can embrace uncertainty. The two go hand in hand. And for me, it was that when you determine your value, when you are so crystal clear on your value, you let go of outside forces determining whether you are valued or not. You become less fixated on holding on to the past because you're okay with the future. You know your value. So anything that comes your way, you got it. You're good. And I really think, uh, although I had been working on that talk for a while prior, it was really getting crystal clear. For a TEDx talk, you got 10 minutes to share it. And I think in that editing down, I thought, that's it, right? It's really the act of embracing uncertainty and knowing your value. Those two things together is what helped me realize I can let go. I don't have to, I'm not determined by my past. I'm determined by my future, how I dictate my future. And that I think was a big wake up call for me.
Isn't it amazing how creating our content helps us synthesize our thoughts down into something so simple that we can resonate with it and it ends up transforming us? And that's how we help people
Yeah.
transform. It starts with us, right? If we can't do it for ourselves, we can't help anyone else do it. So
Yeah, absolutely.
so I want to get really real because this is a very esoteric topic. So we're gonna what is an exact moment where there's a point of value? Like, what is the talk track going through your head that you can stop and say, this is my value? Like, can you give us a real visceral example of what it feels like when you're in one of those moments where you're releasing pressures and embracing your own value?
Well, I think for me, it's two moments realizing, and it's when I was writing my book, because I talk about the moment in my book, right? I realized I was doing all these PowerPoints and trying to convince the company that acquired us of here's why we are valued, here's why I am valued. And I remember, this woman moved a meeting that I was supposed to have with her 5 times.
Mm.
And I was just like, "Okay, clearly she doesn't value me." And I remember how awful that felt. Like, even when I was writing it, for my book, it was, 8 years later. And so now, for me, the value is less tied to, an experience like that, and more tied to how I'm serving someone, how I'm helping, whether it's a leader or a company. And, I remember in particular, a presentation I gave recently for a company where they've just gone through an acquisition of another company, and I was presenting to this audience of people who had all had to re-interview for their job.
Mm.
And, they're looking at me, and I remember thinking at the end of that presentation, I'm so glad I chose this path because I was the right person for that in that moment. No one else understood exactly how they felt. I did. I knew exactly what it meant to be sitting in their seats. I'd been through it. And so when I talked to them, I could see in their eyes, they were like, "Oh, this woman gets us. She knows what this feels like. These aren't emotions you talk about at work." And so I feel that it was in that moment that I haven't let go of my workaholic tendencies completely because I spent a lot of time preparing that talk, but it was in service to people who I thought, I'm going to make a difference on their journey, a difference that I wish someone had done for me on my journey. And I feel like that's as concrete as I can get to. It's like those moments of clarity that have you realize this work is worth it. And the value that I brought, I know that few other people could have.
That's amazing. Taking your own personal experiences and using it to serve others. And it sounds like releasing the rest because that's part of moving beyond workaholism. It's like you said, channeling that in the service of others, but also releasing all the noise and all of the other things on the task list that are sitting around that so you can be crystal clear about what matters right now.
Yeah, Jenny, what was interesting is after that talk, I thought I was the perfect speaker for that audience. We tend to, particularly as speakers, you compare yourself to, oh, who else talks about change? Who else talks about corporate culture? Right? Oh gosh, maybe I should talk like them. And I thought in that moment, no, the way I talk about, the grief you can go through when your company is changing, you don't know what it's changing into. I get it. I knew it. I lived it. And I was so proud of myself in that moment because I served them in a way no one else could, and I knew it. And I think we so rarely do that for ourselves, right? We still nitpick, oh, so and so would have done it better. He or she could have delivered a better keynote or whatever.
Mhm.
And I was like, no, I I served them, and it does help you let go. It helps you let go of the noise, your past. It's making sure. I guess for me, it's the clarity of understanding who you're serving and knowing you are the right person for them.
Yes. Yeah. Just like my message around, I'm starting to use the words inspiration versus perspiration. If I'm talking to someone earlier in their career where perspiration is still how they're building this broad set of experiences that they can bring to the table, like there's a
Yeah.
whole group of people out there who really truly do want to and need to work a little bit more and apply themselves a little harder. But there's this whole group of people who work too much. And my message is uniquely suited for those people who work too much or can't shut it off. Sounds like you have a similar experience where your message is very specifically for people going through acquisitions who want to honor the human experiences that are created during that very complex transaction because it's money, but it's also mostly people.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I hadn't thought about it, but just as you were talking, implicitly, I wouldn't even say consciously implicitly, I'm trying to convey because during a merger and acquisition, and we're talking about that. So some people, I don't want them to tune out and go, "Ugh, I've never been through. I don't." Any change in business, right? You a leadership change in strategy. You've got a new boss. They all have similar symptoms, right? You start to wonder what your value is. You start to think, oh, will my new boss like me? Will my new team, will I gel well with them? Is this new leadership going to take the company in a direction where they don't value me. All of those have the same effect, right? You wonder where you sit in the organization. And so for me, though, what I was implicitly conveying is don't work like crazy to try and remind people of what you did in the past, right? All of the things, all of the accomplishments, everything. Look to see where you can contribute in the future because we can drive ourselves crazy. It would be like, coming all your softball trophy awards, right? Constantly bringing those into the office. So look at what I did. That's great. You were super at that. But now you got to move forward and look to see how you can contribute in the future. Because I find that a lot of your workaholic tendencies, or let me qualify, my workaholic tendencies to prove my worth, to prove
Oh,
my value. And so
so are
that's,
mine. So are mine.
yeah.
So
So I guess I didn't even realize how much of my talk is about, don't end your workaholic days. Make sure you're putting your energy and effort into the things that count, into the things that matter, and get clear on your value that you determine it.
And you're absolutely right. Of the interviews I've done so far, I don't have enough data to fully like quantify it all, but of all the interviews I've done, the majority of workaholism is rooted in two fears. The first is some sort of performance anxiety, and that's either a desire to perform, like it could be a positive thing. I feel good when I perform. But underneath that all, it's just a desire to be loved, accepted, and good enough. I mean, that's really one kind of pillar. And then the other pillar or the other human need is financial security. People that grew up with less
Yes.
often feel the need to kind of, and I'm one of those too, collect and stash away to make sure that we're comfortable from a financial basis, and we associate hard work with making more money. Because early in our career, that's what it is. You show up, guess what? You're getting that raise, you're getting that bonus, you're getting that. For a certain period of time, there's a direct financial connection to the amount of work you put in, and then it stops. You kind of hit a ceiling where more work doesn't actually help you get further. Um,
Right.
so you're in good company, Jennifer. So so one of the things I wanted to ask is you talked about how your journey is really long. And I want to share this with people because so my journey through workaholism was 18 months. But I was forced, like I had a wall and had to figure it out. And so that's how long it was. However, I'm going through a new journey. So like this year is all about changing my relationship with money. So last year was all about the performance, anxiety piece and what
Right.
my worth is and kind of releasing some of that and stopping those voices. This year, it's all about my relationship with money and motherhood, my definition of what success looks like as a mother and redefining that. So we're constantly tackling new identities that have to be reshaped. But mine was a little bit more of a condensed journey with workaholism because it had to be. How long was it from that first point of, realizing that something had to change to the point where you're like, whoa, those aha moments where you really truly did embrace uncertainty and own your own value.
What's funny because I feel like I've danced back and forth with workaholism in
Mhm.
good and bad ways. I even
Mhm.
joked about my move from 8th grade, but all of that.
Okay.
And what's interesting is even in high school, by the time I ended high school, I'd been student council president, head of the glee club, National Honor Society, salutatorian, and it gets intoxicating, right? They're almost you almost get into a rhythm, and then you get awards because you're the person that they look to, right? And then in college, you know, freshman, sophomore year, kind of laid low, didn't do much, but then started to get more active, top 100 seniors, Illini Union Board, like all these things. So I think the tricky part with it is, you can go back and forth, but it has its intoxicating moment, right? And I think you've
Mhm.
been very good to define the workaholism it's a seductive thing, right?
Mhm.
Because what comes with it, exactly as you said, the promotions, the raises. For me, early in my life, it was all these clubs and being heads of them. And I think it's been a journey because I've looked back and gone, oh, okay, I can see this tendency that I have, to want to be, again, in the room where it happens, to be part of the mix. And I don't know if it ever stops. Yeah, I would say I still work super hard on my stuff, but now it brings me more joy because I'm determining where I put my energy and where I put my effort. Even though I'm consulting in mergers and acquisitions and my success is contingent on, people wanting my services and paying for them, I find success. I've redefined what success means for me. And that I think has helped me reframe how I see my tendency to, to I don't know, dive into a project and go a little crazy on it. So it's for me, it's been a journey. It's always an ongoing journey, I think. I could be the exception. I think it's just my relationship with work has shifted in terms of how I see it and where I want to put my effort for that work, if that makes sense.
It makes complete sense. And you are in good company. I've interviewed a lot of people who said it's not linear. It's kind of like an ebb and a flow, and about recognizing when you need to be on an ebb and in a flow and having the power within you to embrace that and quiet all of those voices in your mind that are telling you it's not enough and you need to keep working so you can truly enjoy whatever cycle you're in.
And I'm really glad you highlighted the financial security piece of it because I don't want to diminish that. I mean, there are a significant percentage of people who are working really hard because they have to. I have had that experience as well. I'm like you though, work really hard, stash away, tighten the belt, get smart so you can have that time where you don't have to work like crazy to just figure out, okay, what do I do next? But I don't want to diminish that for some people, it's not workaholism. It's just needing to make sure that they're financially secure.
Yeah, yeah, and I didn't have that until, I was in my 30s. It took a long time to build up that kind of the kind of space that allows us to stop making decisions, financially motivated decisions, and start to make decisions that serve the world and ourselves. So I'm thank you for honoring that experience. It's a very real thing. And so, like you said, there's a time to pivot. And it sounds like you found it. And if you were to summarize, what is that time that you would tell people it's time to pivot and to make this change?
For me, I what I don't want to say is hey, here's how I did it, and here's how you should too. Because I'm always annoyed when people say, here's the template, find my book, and you too can do this. So I can only describe the moment for me. A couple of things happened. I was still interviewing to be a chief marketing officer. That had been my role. I'd gone through 3 acquisitions, and I was using the time while doing a job search to write my book, How to Survive. Now what? How to Survive Mergers and Acquisitions. And a couple of things happened at that time. One, while I was doing the research, I thought I had breast cancer. And thankfully, I did not. But at the time, I didn't know that. I was going through a battery of tests. At the same time, when I was interviewing CEOs for my book, they kept asking me, well, what are you doing besides the book? And I would always say, well, do you know how hard it is to write a book? I was just proud I was writing a book. They continually said, this is really important information. People need to understand what it's like to go through this and how to lead better. And then also as an individual, how to make the most of the situation. They aren't going to get it just from a book, right? You need to be out there with this message, helping leaders be better. And so they planted that seed at the same time I was having a health crisis. And I remember just saying to my husband, I don't want my obituary to say, oh, she was a great chief marketing officer, right? I thought, man, if my legacy was about helping businesses do better by their people and, to improve the success rate, that could be something I'd be proud of. So I really would say, Jenny, it was the pivot for me came from, I needed to shift the course of my career. And that meant a complete shift. Like we didn't just tighten the belt, we went down pant sizes, right? But it was kind of, it was more the mark I wanted to leave on this planet changed in my head. And that for me was critically important. So I think I can't pass on to anyone, here's the playbook, but for me, it's getting crystal clear. What's your purpose in life? What is the mark you want to leave on this planet? I'd like to think everyone has a mark they want to leave. Everyone has the potential to leave a worthwhile mark. And for me, that was the clarity that I needed.
It's amazing. So this is the part where I try to summarize your map, Jennifer, and you tell me how right or wrong I am. So it sounds like the first thing that you did was when people pushed and challenged you, you used it as a reason to show up and you
Yes.
figured out how to be in the room. And that was really
Yes,
important. Like,
that
I'm
would
going to
be
be in this
true.
room and I'm going to stay in that room. And then it sounds like really recognizing that you needed to embrace your value and stop looking to the past and how other people defined your value, but embrace that change is happening. And how do you own the value that you can contribute right now and release the past? That was the next kind of big marker I heard. And so, Jennifer, thank you so much. CEOs call her the M&A whisperer, and frontline leaders call her the Brene Brown of mergers and acquisitions. She helps CEOs, leaders, and teams understand what to expect during a merger or acquisition and helps people embrace uncertainty. I would highly recommend reading her book, Now What? It's just a fascinating book about all the different characters that you'll encounter during the process and how to make the most of it. And also her TED Talk. And what is the name of your TED Talk, Jennifer? Because I'm going to get it wrong.
Well, the TEDx redefine it as create opportunity in an uncertain world.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I am so honored to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.